Hello once again. I hope you're excited. We're gonna make some beer. We're gonna make some beer. Bear. Beer. Now, to stop any confusion, I want to state it right up front. I have an existing cycle of creating beer, and when I began filming this, I was already in the harvesting phase, not in the creation phase. So the progress of the video is going to come full circle, so to speak. So the point that we're at, the yeast is finished consuming all of the sugar inside of the wort, or the sugary water, and the fermenters are ready to be transferred over into kegs to be pressurized and ready for consumption. So an important note to remember about my particular style of brewing beer, I like beer that's fairly sweet, so I use fairly sweet ingredients. If you're on the drier end of the spectrum and you want a beer with a little bit more roasted flavor, you're going to want to make a dark beer, and you're probably not going to want to add as much sugar as I do. So let's get started. Here's our first clip.
Okay, so here we are. This is right before we're about to take the fermenters up to transfer them into the kegs. As you can see in these two, all the cranberry that I've added is separated to the top and all the oatmeal has fallen to the bottom. And the airlocks, while they're still moving, are moving slowly enough that it's time. Notice the temperature. It's a little cold, but works just fine.
So the thing about the 3 carboys that you saw in the last clip are the 2 that both had cranberries in them were actually 5 gallons of boiled wort split between 10 gallons. So I filled the remainder 5 gallons between the 2 up with hose water, and added the cranberries to give it a little bit of extra body and some kick. Now, since I'm making this video in hindsight, I can tell you I put too much cranberry in and it's a little too sweet. So don't repeat my mistake. But it's really strong.
Okay, so this is the step right before we fill the kegs up. The kegs have been sitting overnight in a bleach solution. You'll notice I have the taps on the one. You have to have the taps on them when you fill them up, otherwise the downspout and the CO2 in don't get cleaned. So anyway, the next step is to rinse them. If you notice, I have a washout area that I built here by adding a bunch of rocks. This is really handy because you will be washing and rinsing lots of stuff. Okay, so we're ready to do the transfer from the fermenters into the kegs. The fermenters are done. The kegs are outside, they're rinsed. This is everything that you're going to need to complete this task. Pan out a little bit. Let me show you how the setup works. Okay, so this is the grand contraption. You start off with the kegerator, the racking cane goes in it, the filter is inside the cane, you've got a little thing up here. You're going to use gravity to filter all that beer down into that keg. So you notice here I've got a funnel, and I've got a grit strainer that's going to get basically the large chunks, and then I've got a fine strainer down there that's going to pick up the smaller stuff into what is essentially a beer bong that has been cut so it fits down inside the keg. Because at this point you want to reduce splashing, so that seems to work pretty good. So this is the setup. I'm going to repeat this 3 times because I still got these 2 to go, and then we'll go on to the curing process.
One thing to remember when siphoning, the reason that I use the screens is because if you don't use the screens, when the beer goes into the keg, you're going to have chunks of yeast that are going to come out in your glass, and it's going to look gross. The other thing to remember is that the racking and siphoning process actually takes a fair amount of time. For the 1 carboy that you saw that was sitting up on top of the stand, it took about 5.5 to 10 minutes to completely strain everything off. Something to remember when you're doing this also is that you do not want to get every last drop. There's going to be a little bit of yeast sediment at the bottom, and it's okay to lose it. So it's better to actually get the 6-gallon carboy instead of the 5 and add a little bit more water to compensate.
Okay, so the kegs are filled, they're plugged into my kegerator. Super awesome. And the pressure on the regulator, right now it's set to about 15 psi. I'll probably turn it up to 20. This is what gets all the bubbles inside the beer and gives it that nice creamy taste. The beer from this point is going to stay in here maybe another 5 days, and it's ready to drink.